The wind howled like a living creature, rattling the wooden shutters of the schoolhouse and sweeping the snow sideways across the village paths. Winter had arrived early in Ashenbrook, the forested valley town nestled between three jagged hills and a river that always froze solid by December. Most children clung to their parents or huddled in groups as they left the little red brick school, their boots crunching through ice-crusted snow. But Lena walked alone, clutching her scarf tighter as she trudged the half-mile path home. She was only 8, small for her age, with tangled brown hair and a defiant chin. Curiosity was her flaw, her teacher often said. Too bold, too wild for a girl in a place like this. Today, though, she was just cold. Her cheeks stung, her fingers were stiff, and the wind bit at her like it was angry. Then, a sound, faint, barely audible over the wail of the storm, but unmistakable. A sharp, high-pitched yelp. Then another. Then 5. She stopped dead in her tracks. The cries came from beyond the path, in the trees. They weren't human, but close, high, desperate, almost panicked, like babies crying. But they echoed strangely, scattered, muffled by snow and bark. She looked back toward the village, just rooftops now, blurry in the swirling white haze. Ahead, her family's cottage waited, warm and safe. But the cries came again. Sharper, fainter. Lena swallowed. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. "Don't you ever go into those woods in winter. That forest eats people." But there was something in the way they were crying, like they knew no one was coming. She hesitated, then stepped off the path. The trees grew thicker the deeper she went. Pines loomed overhead like ancient, watchful sentries, their snow-laden branches drooping low. Her boots sank into the untouched powder with every step, and the temperature seemed to drop with each yard she covered. Still, she pressed on. The cries were clearer now. Definitely animals, but not grown ones. Babies. She stepped over a fallen log, brushing away a curtain of brittle twigs, and froze. There, in a small clearing hidden among dense brush, lay a gruesome scene. Blood. Snow stained with it, fresh, dark, and terrifying against the white. And in the center, a massive, slaughtered bear, its fur matted and its mouth slightly open in a frozen gasp. Lena's heart raced. She started to back away, but then she saw them. 5 tiny bear cubs, barely the size of house cats, huddled against the mother's body, their small forms trembling violently in the cold. One was lying limp, its sides rising with labored, uneven breaths. Another was trying to crawl beneath the mother's arm as if trying to wake her. Lena's breath caught in her throat. They weren't crying anymore, just whimpering, fading sounds, too cold, too hungry, too young. She stepped closer without realizing it. Her instinct screamed to run, but her heart refused. The smallest cub opened its eyes and looked directly at her. Not with fear, not with instinctual panic, but with pleading, silent, shattering, raw. Lena knelt beside them, snow seeping through her tights. She removed her scarf and gently wrapped it around the smallest one. It didn't resist. "What happened to your mama?" she whispered, glancing at the deep gashes on the adult bear. "Gunshot?" No, these were claw marks. Something big had done this. And it wasn't far. A sudden chill ran down her spine. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. Then she heard it. Low, deep, a growl. It came from the trees just beyond the clearing. Slow, dragging footsteps followed, branches cracking, the weight of something massive shifting in the snow. Her blood turned to ice. Whatever had killed the mother, it wasn't done. Lena turned sharply, scanning the trees. Her breath fogged the air as she stood protectively in front of the cubs. Her eyes met nothing but shadows, until one of them moved. A hulking shape emerged between the trunks. Black fur, narrow eyes that gleamed like oil, and jagged scars across its chest. A male bear, far larger than the mother, emaciated, ragged, but filled with hunger and madness. It had followed the scent, and now it saw Lena. Its lips curled back into a snarl. She had seconds to act. Run, and leave the cubs to die? Stay, and be eaten. The smallest cub whimpered again behind her, snuggling deeper into her scarf. Lena clenched her jaw. Then, without fully knowing why, she scooped up the weakest cub, cradling it to her chest, and ran. Lena didn't look back. Snow lashed her face as she crashed through the underbrush. The smallest cub clutched against her chest. Its weak breath warmed her collarbone, but it didn't move much, not even when a branch scratched her arm or when she stumbled, nearly falling. Behind her the growls grew quieter, then vanished into the storm. She could hear the other 4 cubs crashing after her, their small bodies thudding against snow and root. She didn't dare stop. She just kept calling softly. This way. Come on. Just a little further. By some miracle, they followed. Her family's barn sat just behind the house, a gray wooden structure slouched under a sagging roof and buried in drifts. The back entrance, used only during hay season, was nailed shut, but Lena knew where the boards were loose. Heart pounding, she slipped through the gap and into the dark. It was musty and cold inside. Shadows stretched long over stacks of hay and rusted tools, but it was safe, hidden, and dry. She dropped to her knees, pulled loose armfuls of straw, and formed a rough nest in the farthest corner. She laid the smallest cub, barely alive, at the center. Then, one by one, the other 4 tumbled in after her, panting and shivering, noses twitching in fear. Lena didn't cry until then. She sat with them for hours, whispering to them, brushing snow from their fur, covering them with old feed sacks. That night, she didn't go inside the house. She curled beside them in the straw, letting their little bodies press into her warmth. And when morning came, she knew. They were hers now, and she would do anything to keep them safe. The days that followed were a blur of secrecy and desperation. Lena stole milk from the cellar, 1 jar at a time. She dipped cloth in it and let the cubs suckle. She snuck out scraps of bread, mashed apples, boiled potatoes, anything soft and warm. At night, she dragged a blanket from her own bed to the barn. Her mother blamed the dog. Lena didn't correct her. The cubs began to recover. The smallest, the one she had carried, started lifting his head. He blinked slowly and pawed weakly at her hand. She named him Pebble, because he had felt like nothing in her arms, yet had weighed down her heart like stone. The others were stronger now. The largest she called Bramble, for the thorny tuft of fur on his back. The second, Thorn, was fierce and bitey. Moss was the quiet one, always pressed close to the others, and Dusk, with his dark fur and solemn eyes, seemed older than he should have been. By the end of the first week, they began to play. It was dangerous. Too dangerous. But Lena couldn't stop smiling when they stumbled over each other or pawed at her boots. They knew her, trusted her, loved her, and she loved them back. But secrets don't stay hidden for long in a village like Ashenbrook. One night, Lena's father came into the barn looking for his missing hammer. Lena had been feeding the cubs, crouched behind haystacks. Her breath caught in her throat as the barn door creaked open. He stomped inside, muttering. Light spilled from his lantern, sweeping closer. One of the cubs, Thorn, let out a tiny cough. Her father paused. What was that? Lena clutched Thorn, praying he'd stay quiet. The cub squirmed. The light crept closer. Her heart thundered. But just then, the old dog barked outside, and her father swore, muttered something about damn coyotes, and turned back. The door shut. Lena didn't move for 10 minutes after, and that night she didn't sleep. Winter deepened. The cubs grew. Their eyes were brighter, movements sharper. They began to climb haystacks, chew on broom handles, and knock over buckets. Dusk figured out how to nudge the door with his snout. Pebble finally chased his first moth, and Bramble. Bramble had started standing upright briefly like he was showing off, but then Pebble got sick. He shivered violently, refused to eat, and whimpered all night. Lena felt helpless. She wrapped him in rags and stayed up holding him. But the fever didn't break. The village rarely got travelers, but once a month a tinker passed through. Lena met him by the well and used every last coin from her secret jar to buy a tiny bottle of bitter-smelling syrup. She lied and said it was for a sick puppy. It worked. Pebble began to eat again. Slowly, then greedily. Lena wept with relief. But time was running out. The cubs weren't babies anymore. Their growls were deeper, their play more violent. Dusk knocked over a pitchfork. Thorn bit through a sack of oats. Bramble broke a crate clean in half. And they were heavy. The barn floor creaked beneath them. The villagers started whispering. Someone's chickens were found mauled. Another's trash torn open. Deep tracks appeared outside the bakery one morning. Bears, they said, must have come down early. Not normal for this time of year. Lena's hands trembled every time she heard the talk. She hugged the cubs tighter at night, whispered to them to be quiet, to stay hidden. But they didn't understand. She tried teaching them not to growl, not to bang things. She started locking the back door with wire and rope. But it was too late. The hunters began organizing. 3 men. One of them was Lena's uncle. They loaded rifles and sharpened axes, talked about protecting the children, about setting traps. Lena didn't sleep that night. She stayed in the barn, holding Pebble, listening to the others breathe. They were so alive, so trusting. "I won't let anything happen to you," she whispered. "I promise." She meant it, but promises don't stop fate. The next morning, she woke to silence. Panic gripped her chest before her eyes even opened. The barn was empty. No growls, no shuffling, no warm bodies curled beside her. She shot up. The hay was torn. The back door was open, rope hanging loose. Snow blew in on the wind. She ran to the entrance, heart in her throat. Outside, muddy paw prints, leading toward the forest, and, beside them, blood. Just a smear at first, then more, trailing into the trees. 8 winters came and went. Lena changed. The world didn't. Ashenbrook remained a sleepy forest village where everyone knew everyone else's secrets, except for Lena's. To the townsfolk, she was just that odd girl, the one who walked alone, talked to animals, stared at the tree line a little too long. She didn't laugh at the boys' jokes. She didn't braid her hair like the other girls. She sketched wolves and owls in the margins of her school books. No one asked why. They wouldn't have understood anyway. She never told anyone what happened to the cubs that night. She'd searched the forest until her boots were soaked and her throat raw from calling their names. She followed bloody paw prints that vanished into the snow. She climbed ridges, checked traps, questioned hunters. Nothing. Not a single sign. After the thaw, she visited the barn every day for weeks. Then every week for months. Then only sometimes. But she never truly stopped. Even now, at 16, she still left scraps behind the old barn, just in case. The first flakes came down sharp and dry. Lena was deep in the woods that day, sitting on a rock shelf above the frozen stream, sketchbook balanced on her knees. A red fox watched her from the other side, motionless, its breath visible in the cold air. She barely noticed the clouds. The storm rolled in without warning, dense, angry, swallowing the light. Trees thrashed, wind howled. The fox vanished. Lena packed up quickly, slinging her satchel across her back and moving fast. She knew these paths. She'd walked them 100 times. But the storm didn't care. Visibility dropped to near zero. Snow fell like sand in a desert wind. Branches snapped overhead. The ground became a shifting white blur. Then her boot caught something. She fell hard, her ankle twisting beneath her. A sickening crunch shot pain up her leg. She screamed, tried to stand, but collapsed again. Her world tilted. Her breath came in fast, panicked gasps. She was lost. Dusk fell faster than it should have. The storm's roar became a low, constant growl in the distance, and everything grew still. Lena dragged herself beneath a fir tree, curling into a ball. Her ankle throbbed. Her coat was soaked. Her fingers were stiff and useless. She couldn't feel her toes. For a moment she imagined lying down and closing her eyes. Just until morning. But deep down she knew morning might never come. Then, a sound. Faint but deliberate. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Not the scurry of fox or deer, not the skitter of branches. These were footsteps, heavy, intentional. Lena's pulse spiked. She didn't move, barely breathed. Another step, then a shape appeared through the flurry, massive, hulking, dark against the snow. A bear, its eyes locked with hers. It stopped just feet away, towering, silent. Lena froze. The wind stilled. Time slowed. The bear tilted its head. Then, gently, it stepped closer, lowered itself, nudged her ankle with its nose. Lena gasped. The bear sniffed again, then released a soft, breathy huff. Not aggressive, not territorial. It was familiar. Another shape emerged behind it, then another, and another, 5 in total. They stood in a half-circle around her, muffled by the snowstorm, glowing in the pale moonlight. She knew. Her mouth moved before her brain could catch up. Bramble? The front bear, massive, with a thick mane of fur along his back, huffed again and stepped forward. His eyes met hers. She didn't need proof. She didn't need a miracle. It was him. Bramble, the weakest cub who once trembled under hay, was now a towering beast with scars on his flank and strength in his stride. But his eyes were the same. The others waited behind him. Thorn with a torn ear, Dusk with fur black as coal, Moss staying close, Pebble smaller than the rest but sharp-eyed and fast. They hadn't forgotten her. 8 years, and they had found her. Lena blinked back tears. She tried to sit up, but her ankle screamed. "I can't walk," she whispered. I can't." The bears looked at one another. Then Bramble moved forward again. He lowered his head, inspecting her carefully. And then he grabbed her coat collar gently in his jaws. She flinched. But he didn't bite. He tugged, slow and careful, just enough to lift her halfway from the snow. The others began moving, forming a perimeter. Lena's heart thudded. He was dragging her. But where? The dragging stopped. Snow no longer bit at Lena's skin. The whirling wind softened, muffled. A new silence took hold. Thicker, closer. Through the haze of pain and frostbite she felt the air shift. Then, warmth. Lena opened her eyes for a second. A den. A hollowed-out cave beneath the roots of a fallen tree, walls padded with pine needles and moss. It wasn't big, but it was safe. The blizzard raged just outside, yet here. It felt like the earth had closed its arms around her. The bears piled in, one by one. Not wildly, not as animals might. They moved with purpose. Bramble lay down behind her back, thick fur pressing against her spine like a blanket. Pebble nestled at her feet. Moss and Thorn pressed against her sides. Dusk curled around her head, chest rising and falling like a steady drumbeat. Their warmth spread into her frozen limbs. Their breath puffed across her cheeks. Lena tried to speak. Nothing came out. She let her eyes close. The storm howled through the night. Inside the den, it didn't reach her. Lena drifted in and out of consciousness, lips cracked, fingers numb, heart steady only because they were there. She remembered flashes. Pebble's soft snore. Bramble shifting, nudging her closer. Thorn licking her frost-bitten knuckles. Once she woke to feel Moss place something in her lap. A dead rabbit. Fresh. The scent of blood stirred her awake, her stomach growling painfully. With shivering hands, she tore off a piece, raw and wild, but it tasted like life. They were feeding her, protecting her. By morning, the storm had passed. Sunlight broke through thin branches, throwing golden shafts into the snow. The world was white and quiet, unbroken, pure. Lena opened her eyes. She was alive. She tried to sit up. Pain shot through her ankle, but it wasn't as sharp now. Her body still ached, skin raw and blue in places, but she was alive. One of the bears stirred beside her. Bramble lifted his head, stared into her eyes. She whispered, barely able to make sound. "Thank you." He didn't answer, of course, but the look he gave her, it was all the answer she needed. It took hours to leave the den. Bramble stepped out first, then Dusk. Thorn helped Lena hobble to her feet, his massive side like a furry crutch. Pebble moved ahead, scouting the way. Together, the five of them led her out of the forest. Every few minutes she had to stop, lean on a tree, catch her breath. But they waited. Every time. Quiet, watchful, like silent guardians sent from some forgotten place. And then, just before the village boundary, they stopped. Lena turned back to them, tears stinging her eyes. You're leaving." Bramble stepped forward and touched her hand with his nose, soft, cold. She touched his fur one last time. Then they turned. One by one they slipped into the woods. No drama, no growls, no hesitation. Like shadows. Like ghosts. She stumbled into Ashenbrook before noon. Half collapsed, face burned red from cold, hair tangled with pine needles, barely able to speak. The first person who saw her screamed. Within minutes, villagers gathered. Her father ran from the store, mouth wide in shock. The doctor rushed to examine her. Her ankle was swollen twice its size. Frostbite nipped her fingers and toes. Her lips were blue, but her eyes were clear. They asked 1,000 questions all at once. Where were you? How did you survive? What happened out there? Were you alone? Lena sat on a hay bale, wrapped in thick blankets, steam rising from a mug of broth in her hands. She said only 4 words. They remembered the way. Silence fell. No one knew what to say. She didn't explain. Not fully. She didn't need to. Some things don't require proof. The truth was in her eyes. Epilogue. Years later, Lena didn't leave Ashenbrook. She didn't marry. She didn't leave for the city like so many others. She stayed. But she changed. She built a small wildlife shelter at the edge of town, became a fierce advocate for the forest and its creatures, trained in rescue, conservation, tracking. Villagers started calling her the Bear Whisperer. Children gathered around her in the summers, sitting cross-legged in the grass as she told stories, not fairy tales, but lessons, about animals, respect, balance. On her shoulder, she wore a pendant shaped like a paw. No one ever found the den. No one else ever saw the 5. But sometimes, on quiet mornings, she hiked to a ridge near the tree line with a little girl from town, her apprentice, teaching her how to read tracks in the mud. The child pointed to the distance. "Miss Lena, look!" Across the ravine, 5 shadows stood among the trees. Still, silent, watching. One of them, Bramble, older now, heavier, lifted a paw. Not a threat, not a warning. A wave. Lena smiled. "I remember too.